single vision can change everything. Elara, a young storyteller for the first people, saw her people's history fading like a dying ember. This vision drove her to a desperate choice: to enter the forbidden crystal halls of memory. The elders had decreed the halls off limits, a place of immense danger. Exile, or a far worse fate, awaited any who defied them. Yet Elara knew that deep within those crystalline walls rested a single lost memory shard, the only key to preserving her people's entire legacy. By the end of her journey, you will understand how one person's courage can save the soul of a civilization. Where are you listening from right now? And what is the local time where you are? Have you ever wondered what you would risk to save the most important story you know? The air grew thick and heavy beneath the canopy of the whispering woods. Ancient trees loomed, their gnarled roots coiling like sleeping serpents across a path only Elara could feel. This was no ordinary forest. It was a living guardian, and it knew she did not belong. Vines, sharp as obsidian and quick as striking adders, slithered from the shadows, twisting toward her ankles with a hunger that was not for nourishment, but for silence. They sought to drag intruders into the deep earth, to be forgotten. Elara's breath caught, but her hands did not tremble. She closed her eyes, pushing past the fear, and let a melody rise from her throat. It was an old song, one her grandmother had sung, a tune of greeting and respect for the living world. The words were from a tongue so ancient, even the elders rarely spoke it. As the notes wove through the damp air, the aggressive vines slowed their advance. They began to sway, not with menace, but with a slow, rhythmic pulse, as if remembering a dream from a time before time. They curled back, creating a narrow passage for her, their sharp edges softening into gentle tendrils. This was her first true test, and her success was a quiet confirmation. Her connection to the old ways was not just a memory, it was a living thread she could still touch. But the forest was not finished with her. As she stepped past the last of the vines, a voice that was not a voice brushed against her mind, a sound like rustling leaves and crumbling stone. It carried a final warning. The true guardian of the crystal halls does not test the strength of your arm, it whispered, but the truth within your heart. What you seek, it will show you what you are. And with that, the whispering woods fell utterly silent, leaving Elara alone with the weight of a challenge she could not prepare for with any song or story. The path ended abruptly at a cliff face, a wall of seamless black rock that seemed to swallow the very light. Set into its center was a single, monolithic figure, a being of stone so ancient that lichen crusted its shoulders like a mantle. This was the stone Sentinel, and it did not move, it did not breathe. It simply was a perfect and immovable barrier. Its head, a rough-hewn block, held no eyes, yet Elara felt its attention settle upon her, heavy as the mountain itself. Her first instinct was to find a crack, a weakness, a way to climb around it, but the stone was flawless. Her second thought was of fear, a primal urge to flee from this silent judgment. But she stood her ground, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The Sentinel was not a creature to be fought or outwitted. It was a question given form. And so, she answered it with the only truth she had left. She did not sing a song of power or recite a legend of heroes. Instead, she let her voice fall to a whisper and began to tell a simple story. It was the story of the summer the river ran dry, a memory from her own childhood. She spoke of the cracked, thirsty earth, of the way the elders quietly gave their own water rations to the children, their own hands growing frail. She described the shared silence of a community, facing a loss they could not name, the way they huddled together not for warmth, but for the simple, aching proof that they were not alone in their struggle. It was a tale not of glory, but of fragility, of the quiet, enduring bonds that hold people together when everything else falls apart. As she spoke the final word, a deep, grinding rumble echoed from the stone. A single hairline fracture appeared on the Sentinel's chest, not a mark of damage, but a seam of light. Then, with the slow, inevitable grace of a tectonic shift, the great stone figure stepped to one side. The movement was not a gesture of permission, but one of reverence. The cavern entrance stood open, a dark maw waiting. The Sentinel's lesson echoed in the newfound silence. The key was not strength or cleverness, but the courage to offer a vulnerable truth. This was the nature of the halls she was about to enter. They would not be conquered. They would be understood, and the memory she sought would demand a truth far greater than any she had yet given. The air within the cavern was not still, but alive with a chorus of whispers. Each step Elara took sent a ripple through the silence, and the chamber answered. With one footfall, a wave of pure, unbridled joy washed over her, the laughter of 100 forgotten festivals ringing in her ears. With the next, a profound, collective sorrow pulled at her heart, the weight of 1,000 farewells pressing down on her spirit. This was the threshold of echoes, and the crystalline floor did not merely carry sound. It carried the emotional residue of every soul who had ever passed this way. The path ahead shimmered, unstable and wavering like a mirage, threatening to dissolve entirely beneath the torrent of feeling. To move forward, she had to find an anchor within the storm. She closed her eyes, shutting out the chaotic symphony, and reached for a memory untouched by time's distortion. It was the memory of her grandmother's hands, gnarled and warm, carefully shaping a lump of clay by the firelight. She focused on the scent of the wet earth, the quiet, rhythmic scratching of her grandmother's tool, the feeling of absolute safety and belonging that filled the small hut. She did not just recall the scene, she poured her entire being into the feeling of it. As she held that single, pure memory in her mind, a narrow, solid path of light crystallized beneath her feet, leading forward into the gloom. The chaotic echoes receded, respecting the space her focused intention had created. She understood now that the halls were a mirror, reflecting back the state of the mind that entered them. A scattered thought would create a scattered path. A heart filled with fear would summon only shadows. To navigate this place, to find the one shard she needed, she would have to master not just her footsteps, but her very soul. The next chamber awaited, and it promised a test far more personal than any she had yet faced. The path of light led her into a chamber that felt less like a room and more like the inside of a beating heart. The walls themselves pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, and the air hummed with a sound that was not a sound, but the vibration of pure potential. These were not echoes of events that had passed, but the raw, unformed substance of what had yet to be. Elara stood in the chamber of first dreams. All around her, swirling within the crystalline walls, were the captured dreams of the world's first sleepers. She saw visions of strange, towering plants and skies, filled with unfamiliar constellations, the subconscious longings of minds just beginning to explore the frontiers of imagination. One dream, in particular, called to her. It was a vision of flight, a shimmering, fragile pattern of light that was growing faint, its edges blurring into the surrounding glow. It was the dream of soaring above the earth, and it was on the verge of being lost forever. Without thinking, Elara leaned close to the wall and exhaled a soft, steady breath onto the fading light. She poured her own focus, her own yearning for freedom and perspective into that single breath. For a glorious moment, the dream flared with brilliant clarity. The pattern solidified into a vivid image of vast, open skies and a breathtaking view of the world from a great height. She felt a phantom wind against her cheeks, a dizzying sense of weightlessness that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Then the moment passed. The dream settled back into the wall, no longer fading, but preserved with a new, gentle stability. A wave of profound fatigue washed over Elara, so deep it felt as if she had given away a piece of her own vitality. She leaned against the cool crystal, her breath shallow. This simple act of preservation had required a piece of her own life force. It was a quiet, sobering revelation. To save a memory, to keep a story alive, one must be willing to offer a part of oneself in exchange. The cost was real, and it was personal. This truth settled in her heart, heavier than any stone, as she gathered her strength to press onward. The path opened into a vast, echoing chasm, its depths lost in a swirling mist of silver and blue. Spanning the abyss were 3 bridges, each a ribbon of solidified light, each humming with a different, distinct energy. To the left, the bridge of knowledge shimmered with a cool, intellectual certainty, its form elegant and logical, promising answers to every question. To the right, the bridge of courage blazed with a fierce, golden resolve, its light defiant and unyielding, offering the strength to face any terror. And directly ahead, the bridge of sacrifice glowed with a softer, more solemn light, a warm and melancholy hue that seemed to understand the weight of consequence. Elara did not hesitate. The lesson of the Chamber of First Dreams was still fresh within her, the echo of her own expended vitality, a quiet hum in her veins. To know a thing was not enough. To be brave in the face of it was not enough. True preservation, the kind that could save a civilization from fading into dust, demanded something more intimate. It required a piece of the preserver to become part of the preserved. She stepped onto the bridge of sacrifice. The moment her foot touched the glowing path, it solidified into a firm, unwavering road of crystal beneath her. But a sudden, sharp ache bloomed in her chest, not of physical pain, but of a profound and specific emptiness. A memory, bright and cherished, was gently but irrevocably drawn from the fabric of her mind. It was the memory of learning to weave with her mother, the feeling of small, clumsy fingers being guided by patient, steady hands, the scent of dried reeds, and the sound of her mother's laughter. The memory did not vanish, but it changed. The vivid, emotional color of it drained away, leaving behind the bare facts, the silent script of the event without its accompanying music. The warmth was gone, leaving only the description of warmth. The bridge held firm, its price paid in full and without negotiation. She had given a fragment of her own story to make the path forward possible, a quiet, devastating exchange that confirmed the most sacred of laws. Nothing of true value is ever truly free. A story kept alive is a story that forever carries a whisper of the one who chose not to let it go. The bridge ended at last, depositing her into a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. Before her stood a figure woven not from flesh and bone, but from shimmering mist and the faint, mournful sound of syllables long unspoken. This was the guardian of whispers, a being composed of the forgotten names of the first people. Its form shifted constantly, a swirling tapestry of lost identity. Across the chamber wall, a mural stretched, its colors faded to near invisibility, depicting 3 ancestral figures in scenes of daily life, their faces and their stories erased by time. The guardian did not move to block her path. Instead, a single, clear question formed directly in her mind, a demand that carried the grief of 1,000 unremembered lives. To pass, you must return what was lost. Speak their names. Elara's heart sank. These were not the great chieftains or legendary heroes whose tales were still told around the fire. These were the quiet ones, the makers, the healers, the keepers of small, essential truths. Her dedication to the deepest lore was being tested, not her knowledge of epic battles, but her memory of the people who built the world in which those battles were fought. She stepped closer to the mural, her eyes tracing the ghost of a figure shaping a clay pot. She reached into the oldest songs, the lullabies and the work chants, the fragments the elders deemed unimportant. A name surfaced, fragile as a dried leaf. Kaelin, she whispered, the one who taught the clay to sing. A single strand of the guardian's misty form, solidified into a thread of steady, warm light. She moved to the next figure, shown with a hand resting on a sapling. Another name rose from the depths of a forgotten harvest blessing, Lyra, who listened to the seeds as they slept. A second thread of light bloomed within the guardian. The third figure was the most faded, a mere outline gathering fruit. Desperation clawed at her. She closed her eyes, pushing past the famous legends, searching for the story her grandmother had told her once, a tale of a woman who could taste the sunlight in a berry and know if it was meant for healing or for strength. The name came to her on a breath, so quiet it was almost lost. Fenna, the sun taster. As the third name left her lips, the guardian of whispers dissolved not into nothing, but into a torrent of brilliant, silent light. The entire chamber ignited, the mural blazing with restored color and life, the 3 ancestors now vivid and eternal in their legacy. But as the light began to fade, a final whisper brushed against her soul, a warning from the now vanished guardian. You have remembered others. Now, you must be willing to be forgotten. The light in the chamber dimmed, leaving her alone with a chilling and deeply personal dread. The path beyond the guardian narrowed into a twisting, turning maze of pure obsidian. This was the labyrinth of lost moments, and its walls did not stand still. They shifted and flowed like dark water, their surfaces shimmering not with light, but with the echoes of profound regret. Elara saw glimpses of paths not taken, of words left unspoken, of small kindnesses withheld. The very air was thick with the weight of what could have been, and every step forward felt like wading against a current of silent sorrow. A faint, flickering light drew her to a dead end. There, trapped within the wall itself, was the translucent form of an elder, his face etched with an ancient, unresolved anguish. He was not a ghost of a person, but a ghost of a moment, an echo of a story that had never found its ending. He had been a keeper of lore, and in his final days, a sudden illness had stolen his voice before he could pass on a crucial teaching about the harmony of the community. His regret was not for his own passing, but for the wisdom that had died with him, a single note missing from the great song of his people. Elara did not try to pull him free. Instead, she sat before the shimmering wall, listening not with her ears, but with her heart, to the silent story his echo projected. She felt the shape of the missing lesson, a simple parable about how the strongest basket is woven not from perfect reeds, but from many different strands, each supporting the other. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. She gave voice to the story he had left unfinished, giving it form and sound and life. She wove the parable of the different reeds into a new tale, one that honored his intent and completed the circle of his thought. As the final word left her lips, the elder's echo smiled, a look of profound peace washing over his features. His form dissolved into a soft, warm light that flowed into her, and the obsidian wall before her melted away, revealing the true path forward. But the peace she had given him did not leave her untouched. A residue of his regret settled deep within her spirit, a quiet, aching knowledge of the fragility of legacy. She had helped him find rest, but in doing so, she had taken on the memory of his failure. The Labyrinth had taught her a difficult truth. Some memories are not just stories to be preserved, they are shared burdens, and the act of carrying a piece of another's sorrow is sometimes the only way to truly set them free. The residue of the Labyrinth's sorrow still clung to her spirit as the path finally opened into a grotto of impossible stillness. At its center stood a fountain carved from pale, veined marble, its waters flowing in a perfect, graceful arc without making a single sound. This was the fountain of silence, and its presence did not just bring quiet, it consumed sound itself. The air around it was a void, a pocket of absolute auditory nothingness. To continue, she would have to drink, and the price was plainly written in the profound emptiness of the space. Her voice, her most precious tool as a storyteller, would be temporarily lost. With a final, steadying breath, she cupped her hands, drank the cool, tasteless water, and felt a sudden, startling hollowing in her throat. The ability to form sound was simply gone, leaving a quiet void where her voice had been. A figure emerged from the shadows behind the fountain, a spirit woven from shifting sand and soft light. It made no sound, but its hands moved in a fluid, expressive dance, its eyes holding a deep and patient understanding. It gestured toward the sandy floor of the grotto, then to her, an unspoken invitation. Frustration rose in her chest. How could she possibly converse, let alone ask for guidance, without her voice? She pointed desperately toward the path ahead, then back to herself, her movements sharp with urgency. The spirit simply watched, its own hands still. It was waiting for something else. Forcing herself to calm down, Elara knelt and drew a single symbol in the sand with her finger. A simple circle, bisected by a line, the old sign for a question. The spirit's eyes brightened. It smoothed the sand and drew a new symbol in reply, a winding path that ended in a spiral, a question for a question. What is your destination? What is its purpose? And so began a slow, deliberate conversation, written in transient marks. She drew a shard of crystal. It drew a teardrop. She drew a group of people gathered around a fire. It drew a single, fading star. Through this silent dialogue, Elara was forced to listen not with her ears, but with her entire being. She had to interpret the subtlety of a line's curve, the pressure of a finger in the sand, the timing of a pause. She was not telling a story. She was participating in a shared, silent understanding. The spirit was not giving her answers. It was guiding her to listen to the questions she had not thought to ask herself. In that profound silence, she realized that her entire journey had been fueled by the need to speak, to preserve the stories by giving them voice. But here, stripped of that power, she discovered a deeper truth. True understanding does not always begin with speaking. It begins with a quiet, receptive heart. The most powerful stories are not just told, they are heard, and sometimes the most important thing you can offer is not your voice, but your silence. As this realization settled within her, the spirit nodded, a slow, deep gesture of respect. It pointed to a narrow passage ahead, then drew one final symbol in the sand, a small, open hand, before its form dissolved back into the light. The path was open, but the hollow feeling in her throat remained, a quiet reminder of the power found in listening. The silence of the grotto faded, replaced by a soft, rhythmic sound like distant rain. The passage opened into a cavern dominated by a single, magnificent willow tree, its branches cascading in a curtain of shimmering, silver-green light. But this was no ordinary tree. From its drooping boughs, tears fell not as water, but as solid, crystalline drops that pooled on the ground with a sound of pure sorrow. This was the weeping willow of time, and each of its tears was a crystallized moment of grief from the long history of the world. The air itself ached with a timeless, collective sadness. Elara, her voice still a void within her, approached slowly. She could not speak words of comfort, but she understood that the tree did not need words. It needed a memory to counteract its sorrow, a story to prove that grief was not the only fruit of time. She knelt before the great trunk and placed a hand upon its bark, which felt strangely warm, like living skin. Closing her eyes, she did not try to speak. Instead, she focused all her energy, all her intent, on a single memory from her own people's past. She recalled the year of the great storm, when the winds tore the roofs from the huts, and the floods washed away the food stores. She did not project the fear or the loss. She projected what came after. She poured into the tree the memory of how the entire community, from the smallest child to the most elder, had worked together. She showed it the image of hands, young and old, clearing debris. She shared the feeling of shared warmth as they huddled in the one remaining longhouse, passing a single bowl of broth, each person taking only a small sip so that others might have more. She conveyed the moment when a single, weary voice began a simple song of resilience, and how, one by one, every other voice joined in until the sound was stronger than the memory of the storm outside. It was a story not about avoiding hardship, but about transcending it through unity. As this memory flowed from her into the tree, a profound change occurred. The weeping slowed. One single tear, forming at the tip of a low-hanging branch, ceased its fall. Instead of hardening into another sorrow, it began to glow with a soft, internal light. It swelled, transforming from a tear into a perfect, luminous seed, pulsing with a gentle, hopeful warmth. The seed detached and floated gently down, coming to rest in Elara's waiting palm. The tree's branches rustled, not with sorrow, but with a sound like a sigh of relief. A single, clear thought entered her mind, a gift from the ancient Willow. Tend this hope, for it is now yours to carry. The weight in her hand was negligible, but the responsibility it represented was immense. She had not just received an object, she had been entrusted with a living fragment of hope, born directly from the act of sharing a story of healing. Its light was beautiful, but she knew it was also fragile, a small, defiant flame in an immense darkness that she must now protect with the entirety of her being. A new sound began to weave through the cavern, not of weeping, but of whispers. These were not the chaotic echoes of the threshold, but distinct, gentle voices that called her name with a familiar warmth that tugged at the very core of her being. The path opened into a hall of towering, luminous crystals, and within each one, a figure seemed to move. Here was the hall of ancestral voices, and they were the voices of her own lineage. Her great-grandmother hummed a lullaby Elara had not heard since early childhood. The ghost of a long-departed uncle recounted a funny story about a misplaced fishing net. They called to her not with demands, but with love, offering a timeless sanctuary within the warm embrace of memory. To stay and listen felt like the most natural choice in the world, a chance to be forever comforted by the stories of those who had loved her. But to stay was to become a story herself, frozen and unable to carry the one memory that could save the living. The pull was immense, a siren song of belonging that promised an end to her arduous journey. Her hand went to her hair, a simple, physical reminder of her own life. With a gentle tug, she loosened a single, dark strand. She approached a small, unformed crystal near the path's edge, its surface rough and waiting. With careful, deliberate movements, she wound the strand of hair around it, tying a part of her physical self to this hall of spirits. It was not a rejection of her ancestors, but an honoring of them. It was a promise that she carried them with her, and a testament that her duty was not to the past alone, but to the future their past had made possible. As the strand tightened, the whispering voices softened from a plea into a blessing. The weight of their call did not vanish, but it transformed into a gentle pressure at her back, a supportive hand guiding her forward instead of pulling her back. In that moment of conscious choice, her connection to the living world did not feel stretched or frayed. It felt stronger, reinforced by the love of those who had come before, a love that now empowered her to continue for those who were yet to come. She stepped out of the hall, leaving a tiny piece of her physical self behind, but gaining a profound and unbreakable spiritual resolve. A corridor of pure, polished obsidian opened before her, its surface so dark it seemed to drink the very light from the seed of hope she carried. Then a figure stepped from the wall, a perfect reflection of herself, yet its eyes held a void that chilled her to the core. This was the mirror of shadows, and it did not show her a monster or a physical threat. It showed her a vision of the world she was fighting to prevent. In the reflective surface, she saw her village, but it was silent. The communal fire was cold ash. The elders sat with vacant stares, their hands idle, their stories lost to a fog of indifference. The children played with stones, their games devoid of the old songs that gave them meaning. Her greatest fear was not her own failure, but the quiet, unmarked passing of an entire people into oblivion. their legacy erased not by a cataclysm, but by simple, gradual forgetting. The instinct to turn away, to shield her heart from this devastating image, was overwhelming, but she remembered the stone sentinel and the price of truth. She remembered the silent spirit who taught her to listen. She did not look away. She met the hollow eyes of her reflection and opened her mouth, her voice still a silent void within her. Yet, from that silence, a memory of sound arose. She focused every fiber of her being on the oldest story her people possessed, the lullaby of creation, a song that described how the first star sang the world into being. She did not just recall the words, she poured the feeling of them into the mirror, the vibration of the first note, the warmth of the first light, the connection of all things woven into a single, harmonious melody that existed only in her soul. As she offered this pure act of remembrance, the image in the mirror began to ripple and change. The cold ashes of the fire glowed with a sudden, gentle ember. The vacant-eyed elders slowly turned their heads toward one another, a flicker of recognition returning to their gaze. The children stopped their aimless play and looked up, as if hearing a distant, familiar tune. The fearful scene of forgetting transformed into one of quiet unity, of a community remembering itself not through a grand epic, but through the reactivation of a shared, fundamental song. The mirror did not shatter. It cleared, becoming a window of simple, transparent crystal, and the path ahead was revealed. The darkness had not been defeated by force, but dispelled by the active, courageous choice to remember in the face of despair. The memory you choose to hold onto most fiercely, especially when hope feels thinnest, becomes the light that guides you home. Beyond the mirror, the air itself began to hum with a low, resonant frequency. Elara stepped into a vast, domed chamber that felt less like a room and more like the hollow heart of a fallen giant. At its center, cradled in a lattice of petrified roots, rested a single, softly pulsing sphere of obsidian. This was not stone, but the core memory of a fallen star, a being of pure light that had chosen to end its long journey within the earth, its final dreams seeding the very crystals that surrounded her. The star was not dead, only slumbering, and its silent, rhythmic pulse was a language waiting to be understood. Across the domed ceiling, faint points of light shimmered in a complex, frozen dance, a celestial map depicting the star's final voyage through the heavens. It was a puzzle of cosmic proportions, a lock that could not be forced. To awaken the memory too harshly would be to shatter it, to lose its truth forever. Her own voice was still a hollow space within her, so she could not sing to it. Instead, she raised her hands, the seed of hope glowing softly in her palm, and began to trace the patterns above. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, her fingers connecting one point of light to another, not as a scholar solving an equation, but as a storyteller completing a tale. She followed the rhythm of the star's own pulse, her movements a silent echo of its ancient journey. With each connection she made, a corresponding point on the obsidian sphere below would ignite with a soft, internal light. It was a conversation conducted in geometry and light, a gentle coaxing of a sleeping consciousness. When the final point was connected, the entire chamber fell utterly silent. The star's core memory did not explode with brilliance, but rather it unfolded. The obsidian sphere became translucent, and from its heart streamed a tender, golden light that played across the chamber walls. Where the light touched, hidden inscriptions flared into view, carved not by any tool, but by the star's own dying consciousness. The language was one of pure symbol and emotion, yet its meaning flowed directly into Elara's mind. It was not a story of creation, but a warning. The inscriptions depicted a great cataclysm, a seismic shift in the foundations of the world that had fractured the delicate balance of the halls themselves. The crystal halls of memory were not a timeless, eternal vault. They were a living, breathing system, and they were failing. The very act of remembering, of holding on to the past, was becoming a strain on their fragile architecture. The star's final vision was a plea, a desperate message that the preservation of one story could not come at the cost of the entire library. The light from the core memory softened, its purpose fulfilled, and the sphere returned to its dormant, obsidian state. A profound new weight settled upon Elara, far heavier than the silence in her throat. The shard she sought was the key to saving her people, but obtaining it might hasten the collapse of everything else. Her quest was no longer a simple retrieval. It had become a choice between a single song and the entire symphony. A new threshold opened into a cavern that seemed to breathe with music. All around her, crystalline flowers of impossible geometry grew from the soil, their petals shimmering with captured light. From their very cores came a faint, haunting hum, the physical manifestation of melodies frozen in time. These were the songs of forgotten dawns and lost evenings, each bloom a perfect, silent prison for a single tune. Elara moved among them, her own silent throat aching in sympathy. One flower, smaller and more fragile than the rest, pulsed with a particularly mournful rhythm, its light flickering weakly as if on the verge of extinguishing forever. She knew she could not speak, but a hum was not a word. It was a vibration born deep in the chest. Closing her eyes, she focused on the oldest melody she knew, the simple, 5-note theme of the earth's own heartbeat that her people used to greet the morning. She let it form in her mind, then pushed it out through her closed lips as a quiet, resonant hum. The sound was a gentle key, a counter melody of stability and warmth that sought not to overpower the trapped tune, but to remind it of its own nature. The crystalline petals of the small flower trembled. A single, clear chime rang out, and the flower unfolded, releasing its captive melody. The freed tune did not vanish into the air, but coalesced into a single, shimmering note of silver light that danced before her for a moment before floating gently onward, pausing as if to make sure she followed. It was a guide, but the act of creation, however small, had sent a ripple through the silent garden. From the shadows between the flowers, figures began to emerge. They were the harmony drifters, beings woven from shifting harmonies and half-heard chords. They had no faces, only shifting patterns of light and sound, and they gathered around her, their presence not hostile, but intensely curious. They circled her slowly, their forms producing soft, questioning tones, as if trying to understand the source of the unfamiliar resonance that had disturbed their timeless curation. They were the caretakers of this garden, and her intrusion, her act of gentle disruption, had made her an object of profound and silent study. The harmony drifters wove a complex tapestry of sound around her, a living symphony built from the echoes of her own life. A melody of childhood laughter intertwined with the somber rhythm of a first farewell. They were not attacking, but inquiring, testing the quality of her spirit through the music of her memories. To prove she was not a thief of silence, but a guardian of meaning, she would have to offer them a truth more resonant than any crafted tale. She closed her eyes and opened a memory she usually kept locked away. The story of a friendship, fractured not by a dramatic event, but by slow, quiet misunderstanding. She let them feel the warmth of shared secrets, then the slow chill of growing distance, and finally, the hollow ache of a connection that had simply faded, leaving no one to blame but the relentless passage of time. It was a story of quiet loss, one without villains or victory, only the genuine sorrow of something precious that could not be held. As this raw, unadorned memory flowed into their harmonic field, the drifter's chaotic symphony began to change. The dissonant, questioning chords softened, weaving around her offering of grief and weaving it into the larger tapestry. The painful memory did not vanish, but it was transformed, its sharp edges smoothed into a lesson on the fragility of bonds, its sorrow becoming a note of profound understanding in their collective song. Their circling slowed, and their forms solidified from shifting harmonies into a single, focused chord of deep blue light. One of them drifted forward, extending a limb of solidified sound, and placed a small, resonant crystal into her palm. It pulsed with a warm, steady rhythm, and a single, clear thought entered her mind. This is a tuning fork for the soul. It cannot prevent the fracturing of time, but it can help a fragile memory find its true pitch and hold its form a little longer. Their inquiry was over. By sharing a vulnerable truth, she had not proven her strength, but her integrity. The gift they gave was not a weapon, but a tool of gentle stabilization, a testament to the power of honest sorrow to build bridges where force or cleverness could not. A staircase of pure, shimmering mist spiraled upward before her, each step seeming to dissolve into the air as soon as she looked at it. This was the staircase of forgetting, and its price was immediate. With her first step, the memory of the harmony drifter's final, resonant chord vanished from her mind, leaving a small, silent void where the beautiful sound had been. A cold dread gripped her. She took another step, and the intricate map of the fallen star's journey faded from her thoughts. Each ascent was a quiet erasure, a gentle theft of recent experiences. The path behind her was not a path at all, but a growing expanse of mental silence. She clutched the seed from the weeping willow, its warm, hopeful pulse, a tangible anchor in the storm of loss. She poured her focus into that small sphere of light, using its steady rhythm as a foothold, a counter melody to the staircase's relentless silence. She did not fight the forgetting, but instead anchored her spirit to the one thing that could not be taken, the living hope born from a shared story of resilience. When she finally reached the top, she stood breathless, her mind strangely quiet. She could not recall the specific song the drifters had gifted her, its notes and structure gone forever. But the feeling it had inspired, a profound and hard-won sense of trust, remained etched into her soul, a foundational truth untouched by the mist. The memory of the event was the sacrifice, but its emotional core, its meaning, was the prize she got to keep. The staircase had not taken everything. It had only taken what was unnecessary, refining her understanding down to its most essential, feeling form. She now held the echo of the song's purpose, without the burden of its specific sound, a lighter and more focused version of the truth she needed to carry forward. The mist of the staircase faded, revealing a cavern that felt deeply, unsettlingly wrong. The crystals here were not clear and vibrant, but smoky and fractured, their surfaces crawling with a chaotic, unstable energy. This was the archive of unwritten tales, a gallery of stories that had never found a voice. They were not forgotten, they were unborn, their potential energy trapped in forms that could not hold them, sizzling and threatening to dissolve into nothingness at any moment. Elara moved through the disquieting silence, the air itself prickling with the static of narratives that had died before their first breath. One small, jagged shard caught her attention, its light pulsing in a frantic, irregular rhythm. Peering into its cloudy depths, she saw the faint outline of a story, a tale of a quiet hero who had diverted a flood, not with strength, but by redirecting a single stream, saving a valley of sleeping families who never knew his name. It was a story of profound, anonymous courage, and it was moments from being lost forever. Her hand went to the resonant crystal the harmony drifters had given her, the tuning fork for the soul. She pressed its warm, steady point against the frantic shard. A clear, pure tone rang out, a note of perfect stability that cut through the chaos. For a single, suspended moment, the unwritten tale hung in the balance, its form solidifying. Then, guided by the crystal's resonance, it did not simply stabilize within its prison. It flowed. It streamed out of the dying shard and directly into her mind. The experience was not like remembering. It was a torrent. She felt the cold rush of the diverted water on her skin, the aching fatigue in the hero's muscles, the profound solitude of his vigil, and the quiet, unlooked-for joy of seeing the sun rise over a saved and sleeping world. It was exhilarating, a cascade of pure experience that filled every corner of her consciousness with a life that was not her own. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The resonant crystal in her hand went dark and cool, its purpose fulfilled. The jagged shard in the archive turned to dull, inert dust. Elara staggered, her legs buckling beneath her as a wave of mental exhaustion, so profound it felt physical, washed over her. The hero's entire emotional journey was now a part of her, a beautiful, sacred burden, but the cost of holding it was a deep, whispering vulnerability. She had saved the story from oblivion, but the vessel that now carried it felt frighteningly fragile. The final passage opened into a chamber that felt like the center of the world. There, floating at the center of the vast space and suspended by nothing at all, was the crystal heart. It was a single massive gem, its form a perfect, multifaceted sphere, but its light was faint and irregular, a slow, weary pulse that spoke of immense age and exhaustion. This was the core of the halls, the anchor for all the memories held within, and it was dying. The air hummed with a profound, sorrowful vibration, the sound of a great song nearing its final note. Elara knew what she had to do. Every trial, every sacrifice had led to this single moment. With trembling hands, she took the warm, living seed of hope from the weeping willow and the cool, resonant crystal from the harmony drifters. She did not place them with ceremony or with force, but with a gentle, offering touch, laying them both upon the heart's largest facet. The act demanded the very last of her strength, not physical, but spiritual, drawing upon a well of faith she did not know she still possessed. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, a soft, golden light bloomed from the point of contact. It spread through the crystal heart in a wave of gentle warmth, its pulse strengthening, its light growing from a dim flicker to a steady, brilliant glow that filled the chamber with a sense of profound peace and restored balance. But the sudden surge of energy came at a cost. A sharp, cracking sound echoed through the chamber, a dissonant note in the newfound harmony. A single, dark fracture split the polished floor at her feet, a jagged line that raced from the base of the heart out into the shadows. The halls had been stabilized, but the price of that stability was now visibly, audibly etched into its very foundation, a permanent scar from the strain of remembering. The deep, resonant hum of the crystal heart was now a vibration she could feel in her bones, a restored rhythm of life that sang of stability. But that song was immediately answered by another sound, a low, grinding groan that seemed to come from the very foundations of the world around her. The single dark fracture in the floor did not remain still. It branched, like a bolt of black lightning, splitting into a dozen new fissures that raced up the crystalline walls. The entire chamber shuddered, and from high above, a rain of fine, glittering dust began to fall, the halls weeping powdered light. Elara's moment of triumph curdled into cold dread. She had given the heart the strength to beat, but in doing so, she had asked a fragile, ancient system to bear a burden it was no longer designed to hold. The renewal was also a rupture. Her quest was no longer a pilgrimage, it was a race. Somewhere in this vast, shuddering labyrinth was the one memory shard she had come for, the foundational story of the first people. And if she did not find it before the halls came apart, it would be lost not just to her people, but to time itself. The stabilized light of the heart now illuminated her own impending failure, casting long, dancing shadows from the spreading web of cracks. She had to move, not with the careful reverence of a seeker, but with the desperate focus of a salvager in a collapsing mine, searching for a single, priceless artifact in the moments before the tunnels sealed forever. Every groan of shifting crystal was a ticking clock, every new fracture a countdown to a silence more absolute than any she had yet known. There it was. A single sliver of light, no larger than her thumb, pulsed with a soft, steady rhythm amidst the chaos. It was nestled within a collapsing archway, glowing with the warm, familiar hue of the oldest campfire stories. This was the shard that held the first story, the tale of how her people learned they were not alone in the world, but part of a living, breathing cosmos. To reach it, she had to cross a floor that was cracking apart, with great crystalline pillars thundering down around her like falling trees in a storm. Each impact sent shards of razor-sharp memory flying through the air, and the very path she stood on tilted violently, threatening to spill her into a newly opened abyss below. She moved not with grace, but with a desperate, scrambling determination, her eyes locked on that gentle, unwavering light. She was within arm's reach when the world above her groaned with finality. A massive column, veined with the histories of forgotten kings, sheared from the ceiling, its shadow engulfing her. There was no time for thought, only for a deep, instinctual recall. A series of guttural syllables, a chant of protection she had absorbed from the frantic hero in the archive of unwritten tales, erupted from her silent throat. It was a forgotten ward, a plea to the air itself to become a shield. She did not shout it, but breathed it into existence, her entire being focused on the meaning behind the sounds, on the desperate need to preserve what was about to be lost. The air before her shimmered, thickening like hot glass, as the colossal crystal slammed into the invisible barrier. The impact was not silent. It was a deafening chime of pure force that threw her backward, the protective ward shattering under the strain. But it had held for just long enough. The great pillar crashed beside her, exploding into a million glittering fragments, but she was untouched. As the crystalline dust settled, her hand closed around the warm, humming shard. The forgotten chant had worked, but using a memory of such raw, untested power left her spirit feeling scraped raw and dangerously exposed. She had the prize, but the cost of that final, reckless act was a new and profound fragility. The memory shard pulsed in her palm, a tiny, frantic heartbeat against the thunderous collapse of the world around her. Elara ran, her lungs burning in the dust-choked air, leaping over newly opened fissures that glowed with an angry, dying light. A great archway ahead, carved with the history of the first harvest, groaned and began to buckle, its massive lintel crashing down to block her only path of escape. She skidded to a halt, trapped, the shard's warm promise feeling suddenly hollow in her hand. But then, a soft light bloomed from the very crystals of the fallen arch. The ghostly echo of the elder she had helped in the labyrinth materialized, his form now a steady, brilliant gold. He did not speak, but simply stood, his presence a pillar of calm resolve. From the walls on either side, other lights answered. The shimmering note of the freed melody wove itself into a shimmering chord. The gentle, silent spirit from the fountain of silence traced a symbol of safe passage in the air itself. Even the faint, loving pressure of her ancestral voices gathered, forming a collective shield against the raining debris. They were the echoes of every compassionate choice she had made, every story she had honored, and now they were not just memories, but active guardians. They flowed together, their individual lights merging into a single, radiant bridge that arced over the rubble and the abyss, a temporary path woven from gratitude and reciprocity. As Elara stepped onto it, the bridge felt not like crystal or light, but like a profound and unshakable truth. The kindness she had offered in the depths of the halls was now returning to her not as a reward, but as a natural consequence, a force as reliable as gravity. Her own actions had built this road home. She ran across the luminous span, and with each step, she felt a gentle release, a quiet thank you, as one by one, the echoes faded back into the tapestry of the halls, their debt of peace paid in full. The lesson was clear and humbling. We are never truly alone in our struggles, for the good we put into the world quietly weaves a safety net beneath us, often invisible until the very moment we begin to fall. The final gateway stood before her, a wall of shimmering opacity that seemed to drink the very light from the memory shard in her hand. It was not a door of stone or crystal, but a barrier woven from the accumulated doubt of ages, a final test of worthiness. Elara could feel its resistance, a cold pressure against her spirit that questioned every step of her journey. Did her people truly deserve this foundational story? Had they honored their past enough to earn its future? The collapsing halls thundered around her, a stark reminder that hesitation now meant oblivion. Closing her eyes, she shut out the chaos and pressed the warm shard to her heart. She did not summon a list of her people's achievements or recite their great deeds. Instead, she poured into the crystal a single, unwavering feeling, the profound and simple certainty that her people were worthy, not because they were perfect, but because they were trying. She focused on the shared struggle, the quiet resilience, the enduring hope that had flickered in every heart through countless generations. the same hope that had carried her this far. She poured in the belief that a story's value is not in its tellers, but in its power to help those who hear it become more than they were. As this absolute conviction flowed from her into the shard, the small sliver of light erupted. It blazed with a pure, white intensity that did not just illuminate the darkness, but unmade it. The opaque wall of doubt did not shatter or crumble. It dissolved, fading like a morning mist under a strengthening sun, leaving behind only the clean, cold scent of the open night air. She had passed the final test, not with evidence, but with faith, proving that the greatest key to preserving a legacy is the unshakable belief that it deserves to be kept. The cold night air was a shock against her skin, a stark and beautiful reminder of a world outside the crystalline depths. Elara stumbled from the mouth of the cavern just as the first sliver of sun crested the distant mountains, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. She was a specter of her former self, clothes torn, face smudged with crystalline dust, her eyes holding a light that had not been there before, a light forged in the heart of forgetting and remembrance. In her hand, the memory shard pulsed in time with the dawn, its gentle warmth a constant humming truth. The village was already stirring, and as the people emerged from their huts, they fell silent, their morning routines forgotten. They saw the woman who had defied the elders, who had crossed into the forbidden, and who now stood before them not as an outcast, but as a vessel. The council of elders emerged from the great lodge, their faces stern and unreadable. They moved toward her, their long robes whispering against the dew-kissed grass. Elara did not flinch or lower her gaze. She simply opened her palm, offering the glowing shard. The lead elder, a man whose name was woven with the history of 1,000 judgments, looked from the pulsating crystal to her transformed face. He saw not defiance in her eyes, but a profound and weary understanding that surpassed his own. He did not reach for the shard. Instead, he slowly, deliberately bowed his head. It was not a gesture of submission, but one of profound respect. The other elders followed, a silent wave of gray heads dipping in unison, acknowledging the impossible journey she had completed and the new truth she now carried. The silence of the village broke into a soft, collective murmur, not of fear or anger, but of awe. The law had been broken, but in its breaking, something far more sacred had been preserved. The courage of one solitary soul had bridged the chasm between tradition and survival, proving that some rules are made to be honored not by blind obedience, but by the deeper wisdom of the heart. The story fire had not burned so brightly in many seasons. Elara knelt before the communal hearth, the memory shard cradled in her hands like a living ember. As the elders and the entire village gathered in a silent, watchful circle, she placed the small crystal into the heart of the flames. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, the fire did not consume the shard. Instead, the shard consumed the fire, drawing the light and heat into itself until it glowed with the intensity of a captured star. A beam of pure, white light erupted from its core, projecting upwards into the darkening sky, not as a single image, but as a symphony of feeling and memory that enveloped every person present. They did not just see the first story, they lived it. They felt the cool dampness of the first morning mist on their skin, heard the tentative call of the first human voice as it learned to sing back to the wind, and tasted the sweet, wild berries that the first ancestors shared, understanding in that moment that they were not masters of the world, but its grateful children. A wave of collective recognition swept through the crowd, a deep, resonant hum of belonging that was both a homecoming and a new beginning. Tears streamed down weathered faces, not from sadness, but from the profound joy of a puzzle finally completed, a song finally heard in its true key after a lifetime of only knowing the echoes. Children watched with wide, wondering eyes, seeing their own place in a lineage that stretched back to the dawn of consciousness itself. The foundational tale was no longer a fragile secret guarded by a few, but a shared inheritance, breathed in by the community and made whole again. In that luminous hour, the story wove itself back into the fabric of their daily lives, strengthening every bond and mending every invisible tear left by years of uncertainty. It was a reminder that a people united by a common origin, rediscovered, carry a resilience that no hardship can truly break. What story, whispered around your own fires, holds the power to make you feel this connected? The celebration's joyful noise had not yet faded when the head elder motioned for Elara to follow her away from the firelight. They walked in silence to the edge of the village, where the shadows were long and the air was cool. The old woman's face, usually a mask of serene authority, was now etched with a profound and weary honesty. She stopped and turned to Elara, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I also stood before the mirror of shadows, she confessed. I saw the same vision of our people fading into silence, our fires growing cold. But where you offered the oldest song, I offered only my fear. I tried to command the darkness with the force of my will, to prove my strength as a leader. The mirror showed me only my own isolation, and the path remained closed. Her admission hung in the air, a shared secret that dissolved the last barrier between them. She had not failed from a lack of knowledge, but from a failure of the heart. I guarded the law so fiercely because I was ashamed that I could not fulfill its deepest purpose. You have done what I could not. You remembered when I sought to command. You understood that the story is not a tool to be wielded, but a truth to be humbly received. With a slow, deliberate movement, the elder removed a simple leather cord from around her own neck, from which hung a single, unadorned stone, smooth from generations of touch. This marks the keeper of memories. The title is not an honor, child. It is a weight. You will carry the joy and the sorrow of our people within you. You will be the anchor that holds us fast when the currents of time try to pull us into forgetfulness. She placed the cord over Elara's head, and the stone felt surprisingly heavy against her chest. The responsibility settled upon her not as a crown, but as a quiet, solemn promise to every soul who had come before and every one yet to be born. That first night, the weight of the smooth stone against her chest felt like a second heartbeat. While the village slept under a blanket of stars, Elara sat alone at the edge of the whispering woods, her hands resting on the cool earth. She closed her eyes and reached not for a single memory, but for the gentle, resonant hum of the crystal heart, now a steady presence in her spirit. She understood that the old way of waiting for stories to fade, and then desperately trying to retrieve them, was a cycle of fear. Her new role demanded a different approach, one of planting seeds rather than salvaging ruins. She focused her intent on the children, on their open, dreaming minds, and she wove the simplest of tales into the energy flowing from the halls. It was not a grand epic she sent, but the story of the first raindrop, a tiny, brave adventurer that left the safety of the cloud to to quench the thirst of a single blade of grass. In their dreams, the children felt the cool splash on their cheeks, heard the soft plip as the drop landed, and understood the quiet joy of a small, essential task completed. They would wake with the feeling of the story imprinted on their hearts, not as a lesson to be memorized, but as a lived experience. This was the true purpose of the renewed connection, a gentle, continuous infusion of their heritage directly into the soil of the next generation's imagination, ensuring the memories would not be stored in a distant crystal, but would live and breathe within them. The air itself began to shimmer, humming with a familiar resonance. From the morning mist, where light and shadow met, the harmony drifters took new form. No longer shifting chords of sound, they solidified into figures of woven starlight and dawn, their presence gentle and inviting. They were the dream weavers now, and they had come at the invitation of the stabilized crystal heart, drawn by the vibrant, living story Elara had just restored to her people. They moved among the villagers not as alien beings, but as old friends remembered in a dream, their touch on a child's shoulder, leaving a fleeting sense of warmth and a faint, beautiful melody that lingered just beyond hearing. To Elara, they offered a silent, profound proposal, a vision of a shared endeavor. They would teach her, and any who wished to learn, how to weave the vibrant, newly lived memories of the village directly into the enduring crystals of the halls. This was not a one-time rescue of the past, but the beginning of a living archive, a continuous cycle of giving and receiving that would strengthen both the people and the ancient vault that preserved them. The Alliance transformed preservation from a desperate act of salvage into a daily practice of gratitude, a promise that every moment of courage, every small kindness, and every shared laugh could become a permanent note in the great song of their civilization. How different would our own lives feel if we knew our simplest acts of connection were being woven into something eternal? The stone felt heavier in the quiet dawn than it had during the night's luminous ceremony. Elara knew that the title of keeper was not a license to retrieve, but a responsibility to cultivate. She gathered the village children, not in a formal circle for a lesson, but near a small, bubbling stream where the water chattered over smooth stones. She did not tell them to memorize the old names or recite the great legends. Instead, she asked them to close their eyes and listen. "What story is the water telling you today?" she whispered. "Is it a fast, laughing story of a recent rain, or a slow, deep story from the mountain snows?" At first, they fidgeted, but then one small girl tilted her head. "It is telling a story about a journey," she said softly. "It is telling me about all the stones it has polished, and all the roots it has given drink. This was the new way." The past was not a locked hall to be entered, but a constant whisper in the world around them, waiting only for a quiet, receptive heart to hear its tale. Respect was not shown through fearful prohibition, but through daily acts of attentive listening. Later that day, Elara walked to the exact center of the village, to the very spot where the story fire had blazed. With the eyes of the entire community upon her, she knelt and dug a small hole in the rich, dark earth. She placed the seed from the weeping willow of time within it, the tiny vessel of hope that had anchored her on the staircase of forgetting. She covered it gently, not with a prayer of demand, but with a simple thank you. The change was not immediate, but it was undeniable. A tender green shoot broke the soil within days, then grew with a quiet, steady certainty that mirrored the village's own renewed spirit. It did not become a grand, towering oak, but a graceful tree with silver bark and leaves that shimmered like 1,000 tiny mirrors, and it hummed. A soft, complex melody wove through its branches, a harmony built from the first story and every story that had been shared since. Children would sit beneath its dappled light, and without being taught, they would find themselves humming along, the ancient melodies becoming the soundtrack to their play. The tree was no longer a single, fragile seed of hope, but a living, breathing anchor, its roots weaving through the village's very foundation, and its branches weaving their song through the hearts of the people. The legacy was no longer stored in a distant, failing crystal. It was alive, growing right outside their doors, a daily reminder that the most important stories are not those we visit, but those we live. The humming of the memory tree was a constant presence in the village, yet Elara began to notice a quiet change within herself. The vibrant pull of the crystal halls, once a magnetic force in her spirit, had softened to a distant, gentle hum, no louder than the whisper of the wind through the silver leaves. She would sit beneath the tree, her hand resting on the smooth keeper's stone, and feel the stories flowing not from the ancient caverns, but from the children playing nearby, from the elders sharing a meal, from the very soil of their home. Her great work was complete. The halls were no longer a fragile vault on the brink of collapse, but a self-sustaining heart, its rhythm steady and strong, nourished by the living stories the community now consciously created each day. This was the balance she had fought for, a cycle of giving and receiving that required no desperate rescue missions into the depths. Her role was evolving, and she felt the shift like a change in the season, both peaceful and poignant. The thrill of the solitary adventurer, facing crystalline guardians and unraveling cosmic puzzles, was fading into memory. In its place grew the quiet, patient purpose of the guide, the one who helps others learn to listen for the stories already singing around them. It was a fulfillment she had not imagined, this gentle passing of the torch, but it carried the faint, sweet sorrow of a chapter closing. The path ahead held no forbidden gates or crumbling labyrinths, only the open field of mentorship, a different kind of courage that asked not for a single heroic act, but for a lifetime of gentle, steadfast presence. The humming of the memory tree seemed to sink into the very earth that night, a lullaby for the entire village. Sleep did not come as a solitary retreat, but as a shared journey. That evening, every single person, from the youngest child to the most stubborn elder, closed their eyes and stepped into the same luminous dream. It was not a story told to them, but one they lived together. They felt the sharp bite of the obsidian vines in the whispering woods, and the profound silence of the stone sentinel's judgment. They shivered in the chamber of first dreams, their own breath joining Elara's to steady a fading vision. They walked the bridge of sacrifice, and each felt the quiet, personal pang as one of their own cherished memories became a little more distant, a little less warm, the price of the path made real. They stood with her before the mirror of shadows and faced the chilling vision of their own extinction, and they felt their collective heart clench as she offered the lullaby of creation, not with a voice, but with her soul. There were no spectators in this dream, only participants. They were with her in the collapsing halls, the crystalline dust stinging their dreaming eyes, their own hands reaching for the shard as the great pillars fell. When she crossed the final bridge woven from her own kindness, they crossed it with her, carried by the same tide of gratitude. They awoke not with a start, but with a slow, dawning unison, as the first light of morning touched the village. Tears were on many cheeks, but they were tears of profound connection, not of sadness. They looked at one another and saw a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement that they now held a piece of Elara's journey within them, not as a legend to be recited, but as a memory they had all earned. Her solitary courage was now a communal treasure, a foundational strand woven permanently into the fabric of their collective spirit. Her story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to the weaver, the farmer, the child, the elder. It was their story of resilience, their memory of how close they came to the quiet, and their shared vow to never let the light go out. The peace of the village was a tangible thing, as soft and real as the dappled light beneath the memory tree. Then the earth itself screamed. It was not a sound, but a violent shudder that tore through the ground, a deep, groaning crack that splintered the morning calm. Homes of woven reed and clay groaned on their foundations, and the terrified cries of the people were swallowed by the roar of the waking earth. A great fissure ripped through the village center, racing directly toward the cluster of huts where the children had been playing only moments before. Elara did not think. She ran to the humming tree, her hand closing around the keeper's stone as the ground bucked beneath her feet. This was not a test of memory, but of its application. The halls had taught her that stories were not just for remembering, they were for using. She pressed her palm against the tree's shimmering bark and reached not for a single story, but for all of them at once. She called upon the solid patience of the stone sentinel, the woven strength of the different reeds from the Labyrinth elder's tale, the resonant stability of the harmony drifter's chord. She drew upon the collective resilience of 1,000 generations, pulling the very essence of the crystal halls through the shard's connection and into the living tree. The tree did not just hum, it sang, a single, clear note of pure defiance, and from its branches, a shield of solidified light erupted, a dome woven from countless glowing threads of narrative. It was not a wall of force, but a tapestry of lived experience, each thread a story of survival, of endurance, of a people who had faced the darkness before and chosen to light a fire. The shield settled over the village just as the main shockwave hit. The earth heaved, but within the dome of light, the homes held firm, cradled in a protective embrace, woven from the soul of the civilization they housed. The violent tremors could not break a barrier forged from the unbreakable bonds of shared history. When the shaking finally ceased and profound silence fell, broken only by the soft, persistent song of the tree, the shield of stories gently dissolved, its energy returning to the earth and to the hearts of the people. They emerged from their homes, unharmed, and looked at Elara, not with awe for a miracle, but with a deep, quiet understanding. The power of their past was not locked away in a crystal heart, deep underground. It was a living, breathing guardian, rooted in their very soil, and it had just proven that the greatest strength of a people is the story they carry together, a story strong enough to hold back the crumbling of the world. The years had woven silver into her hair and a deep, unshakable peace into her spirit. Elara, now an elder herself, sat on a smooth stone bench beneath the memory tree, its leaves shimmering with a gentle, familiar music. She watched the village children chasing fireflies in the twilight, their laughter weaving into the tree's hum, becoming part of its eternal song. The frantic pulse of the crystal halls was a distant, steady rhythm in her soul, no longer a call to action, but a quiet affirmation of balance. The great stories were no longer fragile artifacts, locked away in a dangerous vault. They lived and breathed in the daily life of her people, in the songs they sang, the lessons they taught, and the new tales being born from their shared experiences. Her own legendary journey, once a solitary burden, had been absorbed into the communal heart, a foundational layer in the rich soil of their culture. A profound contentment settled within her, the quiet satisfaction of a bridge successfully built, a song fully sung. Her personal quest was complete. Yet, as her gaze rested on a small girl who was carefully explaining the language of the stream to her younger brother, a soft smile touched Elara's lips. She saw the same fierce curiosity, the same light of understanding in the child's eyes. She knew, with a certainty as deep as the roots of the tree, that she was not the last. New challenges would always emerge, and new storytellers would always arise to meet them. They would not walk her path, but they would find their own, adding new, vital verses to the eternal collection, ensuring that the great story of their people would never truly end, but would forever grow, change, and live.
you.